Okay, everyone, welcome back. It's my pleasure to announce Guido Arnold from Free Software Foundation Europe. He will be talking about open source and free software in Europe in education. So,
thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm one of FSFE's volunteers. FSFE, that's the Free Software Foundation Europe. It's a charity that works to put users in control of their technology. Free software is being used almost everywhere nowadays. Google and Facebook wouldn't even exist without it, because they are benefiting from the freedom software grants them to use, study, share, and improve the software. And the lack of awareness that these benefits could be everyone's, could be all of ours, is one of the problems that FSFE aims to fix. And I think education is a good place to start with that, or to work with that goal. I want kids to be informed, to make an educated and deliberate choice how they want to do their computing. So far to me. Today I'll talk about free software adoption in education throughout Europe. I had to kind of pick a few examples, because 30 minutes won't be enough to cover it all. Statistics, how to or where free software is being used in education are hard to get. I'd say they don't exist. So we rely on media coverage on that. And since 2009, I've been collecting news entries in the wiki and on my blog. And so most of what I mention here, you'll find the sources under these URLs. I kind of structured the talk that I first give a sample for kind of a successful migration of schools, then political backing in a few countries, how the policies work, the motivation behind most migration, what the institutions said why they migrated to free software, and the challenges that you kind of overcome when you pursue such an endeavor. The first example, well, the only example I'll make today is Geneva. They, as far as I can tell, did everything right, because they took their time. They did a few pilots. They provided teacher training, and the whole process started, took them about 8 years until everything was completed. They replaced one application by one, so they didn't overstrain the people that actually had to work with the software. I think that is pretty much the key in any migration. We come to the political backing. That there varies from the permission to allow free software in education at all, as was the case in Latvia. Before they kind of explicitly allowed it, it wasn't even, well, they weren't allowed to use it in class, and that range goes until that the schools had to use free software, as it was the case for a couple of time, well, for a period of time in Russia. But regardless what the policy says, it's always a different question how that looks in practice. The data, how that's actually being done, is pretty scarce, because you find, or you won't read that in the news. I kind of started to ask around, well, you have that policy, what is actually being delivered to the students? So if you have any input on that, just please always feel free to contact us. So on the political backing part, I have 4 sections. First, about policies, what policy needs to have that it really is effective, how governments adopted kind of the free software communities in their countries, Microsoft lobbyism, and the support after successful migration, or the lack thereof. The first example is the Netherlands. They do have kind of free software friendly policies. They have in their constitution that everybody has the right to open access to education. They have a comply or explain policy in place. that they kind of have to use free software unless there is no alternative. Nevertheless, the Ministry of Education in the Netherlands decided to mandate a Microsoft Silverlight-based system to all the students, and by that they kind of excluded free software users because they were kind of forced to get a Microsoft machine to participate in class. We started a little campaign against that. We gave talks, raised awareness among the politicians. Well, that came kind of to a halt when there was a government crisis. And during that time frame, no decision was able or possible to be made by the government. The next government in 2013 quickly agreed that free software users must not be excluded, and shortly after that, the company that was maintaining the system announced that they would switch to HTML5. It might be seen as a success on our side, but what we actually wanted to achieve is change in law that would prevent this from happening again. Because clearly the Ministry of Education did not comply with the regulations that were in place, and there were no consequences. There was nothing we can do about it. Totally different case in Italy. Since January 2014, they have a new law that puts free software as a default, and kind of similar comply or explain policy than the Netherlands, just with a difference that actually has teeth. Because in Italy, courts can cancel contracts that have been made, and if they can prove that there wasn't free software alternative, and well, the best part is the signatories of the contracts can be made personally liable if they can prove that they in case of negligence. So it's a pretty nice thing in Italy, and that so far is the only country that has such a policy in place. Next section is the adopted communities. Iceland I chose originally as an example for many reasons. They had a really interesting history on their way to free software adoption. Right now, for time reasons, I can only say the main reason is they approach the community at an early stage from the beginning, or from the beginning on, and have them involved. The second example is Poland. Is a pretty awesome story. It started with a 15-year-old kid that said something needs to be done, and he offered the schools in his neighborhood that he asked them if he could present free software to them. And he was pretty successful about it, or with that, and quickly gathered more than 150 volunteers throughout the country that went around and explained free software to schools. After that campaign ended, they provided some interesting statistics. Only 7% of the schools they approached said, well, no, we don't want to hear about that. So they kind of almost everywhere were able to present it. And 30% of all the schools migrated later to free software, at least partially, like LibreOffice or OpenOffice. So shortly before that campaign ended, the Minister of Education kind of made a press release that he supports that campaign, and recommended to all schools in the country to switch to free software solutions. But that was not the end of it. The second edition started in 2014, and all the training material, the didactics were all developed in collaboration with experts from the Ministry of Education, and the whole package kind of all has free software, and everything is licensed under free license. All the materials are licensed under free licenses, and you can translate them and use them as you please. So the organization that was founded for that is happy for translation and help. Next one is not such a pleasant subject, Microsoft lobbyism in Spain, where free software has kind of a good standing when it comes to in education. There are many large-scale deployments in a lot of regions. They've been using free software for decades. That's all supported by Synetic, as a kind of a competence center for public administrations, for where they can share their experiences. But that is no wonder that in such an environment that Microsoft gets nervous. And so they approached the Prime Minister Zapatero. First he tried to get Microsoft Windows on laptops. They were about to be purchased, about 200,000 laptops. They were originally planned to be shipped with a local Linux distribution. And he, out of the blue, even though he had nothing to do with it, said, well, he would like that Microsoft would be on there, or Windows would be on there. I think that did not work out, but shortly before his premiership ended, he announced at a fair far away in Berlin that the region of Aragon would start a pilot with Microsoft tablets. And I think 1 or 2 days later, the contract was already signed. There was not much time for all the advocacy groups to react on that. The Hispalinux, the kind of a Spanish advocacy group, they calculated that they could have paid 3,200 teachers for a year for the money they spent for the tablets. Another example in Denmark, with less prominent people involved, but I think with more severe consequences, a lot of community or municipalities switched to free software, or at least to open office. Well, it's still switched to free software. And the municipality of Lyngby-Taarbæk, or the city of Lyngby-Taarbæk, they even developed plugins for Danish grammar and punctuations for the schools. They got some media coverage about that, and that put Microsoft on the plan. They wrote an open letter to the mayor, and that open letter was followed by a few bad news. Oh, these kids, their homework does not look the same at home as that does appear in class. So it's more or less a kind of ridiculous smut campaign, but it seriously led to the displacement of the IT director, the IT manager, and re-migration back to Office, or Microsoft Office. And that is, well, that pattern is being observed elsewhere too. It's not just a single case. This is the answer of a Swedish IT manager who was asked if they collaborate with other communities, and he said, well, that most people keep a low profile because they kind of fear that they will get in the same trouble as the IT manager in Denmark. I think that's a kind of terrible thing, and yeah, just most people are not aware of that. The last part in the political backing is support of the project completion. I won't talk too much about Croatia because I was hoping that I would get some info from you guys how that's actually being done, because you most likely know more about that than me. In Macedonia, with the support from the US, they kind of had a few hundred pilot schools migrated to free software. And it must have gone well, because in 2007 they decided to switch the entire, or all the schools in the country to free software. And that so far were the news. I inquired the local groups there, and according to them, the project was completed in 2010. But the bad thing there, after the completion, there were not even updates, there were no training for the teachers. There was actually nothing. They just kind of being abandoned in place, and are less and less being used because they kind of losing their attractiveness. And I heard that in Croatia, well, that's kind of an article I found that since 2006 there's a similar equal footing policy to Iceland. I didn't say that in Iceland they have a policy that free software needs to be presented on the same level like any proprietary solution. I think since 2006 that is also in place in Croatia, but here it's not being followed that much. There's dual boot in many schools, but the system that is being booted is usually Windows. And also that there are these Microsoft 365 offers that appear free for the students and the teachers. So, but the difference to Macedonia, I hear that the community kind of buffers a lot what the government is supposed to be doing. So the next section is motivation. I skimmed through all the articles for free software migrations in education and looked for reasons. Why did they actually do it? What do they say why they did that? I like the top reason least, and I like the last reason the most. Because for the, there was this municipality in Finland who said, well, we chose free software because that was the only choice that allowed us to adopt it to our needs. And that was just simply not possible with the proprietary solutions. And the save money option is kind of a weak argument anyway, but what's sadly the main reason why cities migrate. Yeah. Yeah, but that was mentioned mostly, yeah, or quite frequently. We have on the FSFE have a kind of a flyer with reasons for schools to migrate, and I compared it. So we covered all of that. We have 3 more of them, but I also noted in the preparation of the talk we don't have a Croatian translation of it. So if you know somebody who's interested, just point them to our direction. Yeah, so we already at the challenges. There are many. I can only cover a few. The most obstacle you'll encounter after immigration is that we are all creatures of habit. That has nothing to do with free software or proprietary software. It's just that it's painful or inconvenient for everybody to leave the tracks we're used to. You can expect anybody to complain if somebody, especially if from outside, tells them to do something differently. And as I mentioned in the Geneva example, they kind of, if you take it slow and provide training and support for them, that will help easing that pain a lot. And if you don't do that, people will just hate what they have to use and do everything to get back to what they are used to. And this fact that we are all creatures of habit is kind of the reason why Microsoft and Apple are penetrating the educational market with such a force, because they know that once they got them, they kind of it will be hard for them or for anybody else to switch them to another system. Richard Stallman compared them once with tobacco companies that give cigarettes for free on the school court. But it's kind of like it. There are also lock-in effects. Sometimes schools are being told by the Ministry of Education to use this particular software to teach this and that, or to transmit any data to the server. And that is then usually only available for Windows. In all of these cases, it can be kind of circumvented with a virtual machine where somewhere on the school where it runs Windows. But yeah, there are also lock-in effects. The teachers kind of create themselves because they like a certain piece of software, and I don't think there's an alternative. I asked them then, what is that software being done? What do you want the students to learn from it? And what is it what this piece of software does so good that they learn it? And if you only go from that angle, it's much easier to find an alternative than a one-to-one that is exactly the same, like what they are looking for. Support is also a problem. The situation is getting better and better every year. There are companies that provide support for schools and for free software solutions, but there are not that many, and not all of them that exist are able to provide that support on a kind of high level. Rock, edu team member from Slovenia, he recommends that to throw out the bad apples soon. That means that put in an exit clause in the contract. If they don't provide the support, that you expect that you can kick them out and get a new one, or don't have long-term contracts in the beginning anyway. Another challenge is that DRM-infected school books are getting more and more used, or yeah, they're kind of getting into the market, and that is kind of impossible with free software to work. The only solution, I think, is that to encourage schools to use more open educational resources, or at least resources that don't have that anti-feature. Then a big change are the frame contracts. Like, I think they also have that here in Croatia, where I think I mentioned them already, the licenses appear to free for the students, the teachers, and the parents, but they're actually being paid by the government somehow. That puts all users in a kind of an all-you-can-eat dilemma. You actually fully don't need it, but it's for free, so you take it, and then at the end you'll end up using it anyway. Also, these Office 365, well, it's not a license, it's more a terms of service to use their cloud services. That was being taken apart by a Swiss expert group. They totally tore it apart. It would be kind of too long to mention everything, but well, you can find the link in the resources I presented. Basically, after they tore everything apart, they recommended to all schools to use free software instead. I think that's about that. I mean, their main concerns were kind of data integrity, login effects. Yeah, I don't have that on the screen right now. So there are more challenges, of course. I can only cover a fraction. Teacher training, I mentioned, is very, very important. There are also some studies that kind of prove that free software is very well suitable for free software, and they all kind of point out that teacher training is key here. The free mobile learning device missing, that's kind of a funny blog. Well, I found it first funny for an activist in Finland. He said everything is fine in Finland. There are support companies. Many schools use free software. The only thing missing is a free educational device or designed for education. That's kind of lamenting on a high level, as you think. But on the other hand, he's totally right, because there is nothing we can or not much we can offer there. We'll come to questions later. I'll just wrapping up in a minute. Because well, Google and Apple are kind of pushing their tablets into the schools, and there's not, well, Android tablets are kind of free, but it's really hard to untangle them from Google. I mentioned most of it already. So with the main point here, what I kind of bring across is that change is possible. Like, I love that sample from Poland, that everybody can talk to his friends and neighbors, that every, I heard about that, helps getting the acceptance and the awareness about free software done. When you feel comfortable, start lobbying about it. We don't have the resources like the big companies have, but we have much more credibility, and I think we should make use of them. Yeah, that's it, and we'll have to questions. One there raised the hands. Yeah.
I cannot suggest a free mobile device, but certainly a freer one than Android and iPhone. Perhaps Jolla tablet and Jolla phone are a good start.
Yeah, I'm waiting on mine. I think delivery start in June or July here. Any other questions or hints for me? Oh, I wrapped it so much.
Any more questions? No?
All right,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.